A wealthy businessman looked at Dean Martin's casual clothes at Beverly Hills Country Club and made a comment he'd regret for the rest of his life. 3 months later, Dean owned his house, his business, and everything he'd worked for. It was Saturday, June 8, 1963, at the exclusive Hillcrest Country Club in Beverly Hills. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured golf course as California's elite gathered for their weekly social ritual of golf, cocktails, and the kind of business deals that shaped the entertainment industry. But on this particular afternoon, a moment of casual cruelty was about to set in motion a chain of events that would become legendary among Hollywood's power brokers. Dean Martin had driven his modest Buick convertible to the club that day, dressed in his typical weekend attire, khaki slacks, a simple white polo shirt, and worn leather loafers that had seen better days. To anyone who didn't know better, Dean looked like a middle-class guy who might be dropping off catering supplies or picking up a friend's golf clubs. He certainly didn't look like one of the highest-paid entertainers in America. Dean's casual approach to wealth was legendary among those who knew him well. Unlike many of his Hollywood contemporaries who flaunted their success with flashy cars and designer clothes, Dean Martin preferred to blend in. He drove regular cars, wore comfortable clothes, and avoided the kind of ostentatious displays that attracted attention and hangers-on. This low-key approach had served him well throughout his career, allowing him to move through the world without constantly being bothered by fans or targeted by people looking to take advantage of his wealth. But what most people didn't know was that Dean Martin's financial empire extended far beyond his singing and acting income. Through a series of shrewd investments orchestrated by his business manager and close friend, Mickey Rudin, Dean had quietly built a portfolio that included real estate developments, restaurant chains, and significant holdings in several major corporations. By 1963, Dean Martin was worth an estimated $40 million, making him one of the wealthiest entertainers in the world. As Dean walked through the club's main entrance that afternoon, he was immediately approached by his friend, comedy writer and producer George Schlatter, who had invited him to join a foursome for an afternoon round of golf. "Dean," George called out from across the lobby. "Perfect timing. We've got a spot open if you want to join us." Dean smiled that famous crooked grin and made his way toward George. But as he crossed the elegant lobby with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, he became aware that someone was staring at him with obvious disapproval. The man doing the staring was Howard Blackstone, a real estate developer who had made his fortune building shopping centers throughout Southern California. Blackstone was everything that Dean Martin wasn't: flashy, pretentious, and absolutely convinced that a person's worth could be measured by their appearance and material possessions. He was dressed in an expensive golf outfit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and he wore his wealth like a badge of honor. Blackstone turned to his golf partner, a banker named Frederick Walsh, and spoke loudly enough for several people nearby to hear. "I didn't know they let people dressed like that in here. What's next? Are we going to start allowing gardeners and delivery boys to use the clubhouse?" Dean heard the comment but chose to ignore it, continuing his conversation with George about their tea time. But Blackstone wasn't finished. He seemed to take Dean's calm response as an invitation to continue his commentary. "I mean, look at this guy," Blackstone continued, his voice growing louder and more obnoxious. "Those shoes look like he bought them at a thrift store, and that shirt has probably never seen a dry cleaner. How did security even let him through the gate?" George Schlatter, who knew exactly who Dean was and what he was worth, started to intervene, but Dean put a hand on his arm to stop him. "It's okay, George," Dean said quietly. "Let the man talk." But Blackstone was on a roll now, apparently enjoying the attention his comments were generating from other club members who had stopped to listen. "You know what the problem is?" Blackstone announced to his growing audience. "This club is losing its standards. We're supposed to be an exclusive establishment, but we're letting in every Tom, Dick, and Harry who can scrape together the guest fee. Pretty soon, this place will be no different from a municipal golf course." Dean turned to face Blackstone directly for the first time, his expression calm, but his eyes carrying that dangerous glint that people who knew him well recognized as a warning sign. "Excuse me," Dean said politely, "but I don't think we've been introduced. I'm Dean Martin." Blackstone looked confused for a moment, as if the name should mean something to him but didn't quite register. Then his face took on an expression of mock recognition. "Oh, you're an entertainer," Blackstone said dismissively. "Well, that explains the casual attire. I suppose you people don't really understand appropriate dress codes for establishments like this." The lobby had grown increasingly quiet as more people became aware of the confrontation. George Schlatter was practically vibrating with anger on Dean's behalf, but Dean remained completely calm. "You know what, Howard?" Dean said, having somehow learned Blackstone's name during the conversation. "You're absolutely right. I probably don't understand the finer points of country club etiquette, but I'm always eager to learn from successful businessmen like yourself." Blackstone preened at what he took to be a compliment, completely missing the subtle sarcasm in Dean's voice. "Well, it's never too late to improve yourself," Blackstone replied patronizingly. "Perhaps you could start by investing in some proper golf attire. There are several excellent men's shops in Beverly Hills that could help you look more appropriate." Dean nodded thoughtfully. "That's excellent advice. Tell me, Howard, what business are you in? I might be looking for some new investment opportunities." Blackstone's chest puffed up with pride. "Real estate development, shopping centers, office buildings, residential developments. I've got projects all over Southern California. In fact, I'm working on the biggest deal of my career right now. A major shopping complex in Pasadena that's going to make me a fortune." "That sounds fascinating," Dean replied with genuine interest. "I'd love to hear more about it sometime. Maybe we could have lunch, and you could tell me how a smart businessman like yourself puts together deals like that." Blackstone was clearly flattered by Dean's apparent admiration. "Well, I suppose I could spare some time to educate you about real business. Most entertainers don't understand the complexities of serious commerce. But you seem teachable." "I appreciate that, Howard. I really do." Dean smiled that charming smile that had won over millions of fans. "Well, I should probably go find some appropriate golf clothes before I embarrass myself further on the course." As Dean walked away with George, Blackstone turned back to his companions with obvious satisfaction. "See," he said loudly, "a little education goes a long way. That young man will probably remember this lesson for the rest of his life." But if Howard Blackstone could have seen the expression on Dean Martin's face as he walked toward the pro shop, he might have been less satisfied with himself. Dean wasn't embarrassed or ashamed, he was calculating. Over the next week, Dean made some phone calls to Mickey Rudin and several other business associates. Within days, he had a complete dossier on Howard Blackstone's business empire, and what he learned was very interesting indeed. Blackstone's real estate empire was impressive, but highly leveraged. Most of his projects were financed through a complex web of loans and partnerships, and several of his biggest developments were on shaky financial ground. The Pasadena shopping center project that Blackstone had bragged about was particularly vulnerable. More importantly, Dean discovered that many of Blackstone's key business relationships were with people who were also involved in the entertainment industry. Banks that financed movies also financed real estate projects. Investment groups that backed television shows also backed shopping centers. And when Dean Martin, one of the most successful and well-connected entertainers in Hollywood, started making inquiries about Howard Blackstone, people listened. Dean's first move was subtle. He had Mickey Rudin reach out to the primary lender on Blackstone's Pasadena project, ostensibly to discuss Dean's interest in investing in retail real estate. During that conversation, Rudin casually mentioned some concerns about the viability of over-leveraged shopping center developments in general, and the Pasadena project in particular. Within a week, Blackstone's lender was asking uncomfortable questions about cost overruns and construction delays. Dean's second move was more direct. Through a series of carefully orchestrated transactions, Dean began acquiring debt instruments related to Blackstone's various projects. Not enough to trigger immediate attention, but enough to gain significant influence over the developer's financial future. Meanwhile, Dean continued his regular social activities as if nothing had happened. He played golf at Hillcrest, had dinner at the Copa, performed his regular shows at the Sands in Las Vegas. To anyone watching, Dean Martin was just going about his normal routine. But behind the scenes, Dean's business team was systematically mapping out Howard Blackstone's entire financial empire, identifying weaknesses, and positioning themselves to take advantage when the inevitable collapse began. The first crack appeared in early August, when Blackstone's biggest construction loan came up for renewal. The lender, influenced by concerns raised during Mickey Rudin's visit, demanded additional collateral and higher interest rates. Blackstone was forced to pledge his personal residence as security for the loan. The second crack appeared in September, when a major tenant in one of Blackstone's existing shopping centers unexpectedly broke their lease, citing concerns about the center's financial stability. The loss of that anchor tenant triggered default clauses in several other leases, creating a cascade of problems that threatened to bring down the entire project. By October, Howard Blackstone was in serious financial trouble. His Pasadena project was hemorrhaging money. His existing properties were struggling with vacancy problems, and his personal assets were increasingly tied up as collateral for emergency loans. That's when Dean Martin made his final move. On October 15th, Dean walked into Howard Blackstone's Beverly Hills office, dressed in an impeccably tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He was accompanied by Mickey Rudin and two other attorneys who carried briefcases full of legal documents. Blackstone's receptionist announced that Dean Martin was here to see him, and Blackstone, still not fully understanding what was happening, agreed to the meeting, probably hoping that the entertainer might be interested in investing in one of his troubled projects. "Dean," Blackstone said with forced enthusiasm as Dean entered his office. "What a pleasant surprise. Have you given any more thought to those investment opportunities we discussed?" Dean sat down across from Blackstone's desk and smiled that famous smile. "Actually, Howard, I have. In fact, I've been thinking about our conversation at Hillcrest quite a lot over the past few months." "Excellent," Blackstone replied, clearly relieved. "I knew you were smarter than most entertainers. How much were you thinking of investing?" Dean leaned back in his chair and studied Blackstone for a moment. "Well, Howard, here's the thing. I've been looking at your various projects, and I'm a little concerned about their financial stability." Blackstone's smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" Mickey Rudin opened one of his briefcases and pulled out a thick folder. "What Mr. Martin means," Rudin said calmly, "is that he's already invested quite heavily in your projects. In fact, he now owns controlling interests in most of your major debt instruments." The color drained from Blackstone's face as he began to understand what was happening. Dean leaned forward slightly. "You see, Howard, that day at the country club you taught me something very important about business. You taught me that you should never judge a person's worth by their appearance." "I don't understand," Blackstone stammered. "Let me explain it to you," Dean continued. "You assumed that because I was dressed casually, I must be some kind of nobody who didn't belong at your exclusive club. But what you didn't realize is that I'm worth about $40 million, and I have business relationships with most of the major financial institutions in Los Angeles." Mickey Rudin spread several documents across Blackstone's desk. "These are the mortgage instruments, construction loans, and partnership agreements for your various projects. Mr. Martin now owns or controls most of them." Blackstone stared at the documents in horror. This is impossible. You can't just... How did you..." "Oh, it's very possible," Dean replied calmly. "And it's all completely legal. You see, when you're in financial trouble, your lenders start looking for ways to minimize their risk. And when someone with my financial resources and industry connections expresses interest in taking over troubled investments, well, banks tend to be very accommodating." The full scope of his situation was beginning to dawn on Blackstone. What do you want?" Dean stood up and straightened his tie. "I want you to remember this moment, Howard. I want you to remember that the man you insulted and tried to humiliate at Hillcrest Country Club now owns your business, your house, and pretty much everything else you've worked for." Mickey Rudin placed one final document on the desk. "This is a purchase agreement for your personal residence. Mr. Martin is prepared to offer you fair market value, which, given your current financial situation, is probably more generous than you deserve." Blackstone looked at the purchase agreement with the expression of a man watching his entire world collapse. "You're buying my house." "Actually," Dean corrected, "I already own your house. It's been pledged as collateral for loans that I now control. I'm just giving you the option to sell it to me directly rather than having it foreclosed on." Dean walked toward the office door, then stopped and turned back to face Blackstone one more time. "You know what, Howard? I think you were right about one thing. This has been an excellent learning experience. You've learned that you should never judge a person's worth by their clothes, And I've learned that sometimes the best investment strategy is to let arrogant people destroy themselves and then pick up the pieces. 6 months later, Howard Blackstone was working as a junior sales associate for a small real estate firm in the San Fernando Valley. His Beverly Hills mansion was now owned by Dean Martin, who had turned it into a guest house for visiting friends and family. The Pasadena shopping center was completed under Dean's ownership and became one of the most successful retail developments in Southern California. Dean kept Blackstone's name on the project as a reminder of where it had come from. And Dean Martin continued to dress casually when he played golf at Hillcrest Country Club. But now everyone there knew exactly who they were looking at. The story of Dean Martin's systematic destruction of Howard Blackstone became legendary among Hollywood's business community. It served as a powerful reminder that in a town built on illusion and performance, you should never assume you know someone's true worth based on their appearance. More importantly, it demonstrated something that Dean Martin had always understood but rarely had to prove: that real power doesn't need to be displayed. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who look like they don't belong. Years later, when asked about the incident, Dean Martin would simply smile and say, "I learned a long time ago that the best way to handle bullies is to let them think they've won, right up until the moment you show them they've lost everything." If this story about never underestimating people moved you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories of Hollywood justice. Have you ever been judged unfairly based on your appearance? Share your experience in the comments below, and remember to ring that notification bell for more amazing tales of when the underestimated became the unexpected victors.